Each disease has its own I heard about diseases. Hi, welcome again to another episode of the Motley Stew Show. My name is Luke Goldstein, and this week we'll be talking about vaccines and whether or not they should be mandatory. Short answer, yes, but we'll get to why later on. Even though the topic has gotten a lot of play in the last couple weeks, let's go back a little bit in time to give it some context. In 1958, there were 750,000 cases of measles reported. That's 750,000 people in the US alone. Then the vaccine comes along. Happy days are here again. In 5 short years, the measles cases had dropped to 22,000. It's not bad at all. Fast forward to 2000 and there were only 86 cases confirmed in the entire country. But then the trending switched and it steadily rose until in 2014 there were 600 plus confirmed cases, with this year likely to beat that easily. Now, why would measles make a comeback? Has it mutated? Has it become resistant to the vaccine? No, neither of those. And no other reason than this. Parents are choosing not to vaccinate their children. Let's look into why. Now, some parents have a religious objection to the vaccines, which in this country seems like a slam dunk defense because no one can challenge religion without getting a lot of heat. Others on the more far fringe seem to have a more conspiratorial view of why they don't want to get vaccinated. They believe that the vaccination program is actually a secret plot by the government to control you, sterilize you, and turn you into a walking, talking automaton for the greater good. Now, those two groups actually form a very small percentage of the anti-vaccination crowd. Most of them fall into a more recent camp, where they feel that the vaccines are actually connected to more dreadful diseases, the most famous of which being autism. Now, why would they think taking the MMR vaccine, which stands for measles, mumps, and rubella, would actually give a child autism? Easy. That guy told them. In 1998, right before the measles rate started to rise again, Andrew Wakefield published a study that connected the MMR vaccine to autism, and autism with gastrointestinal disease. Upon publication of that study, it was instantly called into questions because no other doctors could replicate his findings. A reporter at the time also investigated Dr. Wakefield about a possible connection to a scheme to cause fear against the MMR vaccine, which would trigger a number of lawsuits that he would profit from. Andrew Wakefield was then stripped of his medical license, he cannot practice in the UK, and the study was completely and thoroughly debunked. And he was found guilty of numerous counts of inflicting unnecessary and painful medical procedures on children with autism. Hell of a guy! His study did not disappear into the shadows of the past. It lingered in the fringes and in the deep, dark hope of parents who have children with autism when they're looking for anything to explain what possibly could have brought this on. Grabbing onto anything that they can blame for the condition of their children, this became a raging rally cry from those seeking a definitive answer of what causes autism. Now, many in this circle also believed that the connection between autism and the MMR vaccine was a certain ingredient in the vaccine, which was called thimerosal. Now, that particular ingredient was removed from the MMR vaccine back in 2002, yet the autism rate has continued to rise unabated. Swing and a miss! Sadly, Wakefield continues to defend his study today and stoke the anger and desperation of parents who are already dealing with more than anyone should have to. But the fire got even brighter when Jenny McCarthy, who also has an autistic son, grabbed hold of this study and used it to push forward her same belief that people should stop vaccinating. Due to her celebrity, she not only got a megaphone to the public, but a certain level of credence that she didn't deserve. Now, I happen to know families who have autistic children, and I can tell you, they know more than most doctors about every theory out there, about what helps autistic children, what causes autism, what can trigger autistic outbreaks. They're not to be messed with when it comes to knowledge about it, but most of them also know how to pick apart those theories to ones that actually hold water. Andrew Wakefield's study was bunk when it was put out in England, and it was thrown away, and it was still bunk when Jenny McCarthy came on it. But that didn't matter. A movement sprang up, and now there are an increasing number of families throughout the country that are choosing not to vaccinate their children for fear that they might get autism or some other mental developmental disorder. So spring forward to today, and the reason why we're talking about this is there was an outbreak of measles at Disneyland in California. It caused the park to actually shut down, and then when it reopened, it suggested that any families who have children who are unvaccinated not to come. Do not visit the happiest place on earth. It is not happy. Currently, there are actually 120 known cases of measles that are directly caused by the outbreak in Disneyland. Now, for those of you who might not actually know what measles is, because we had mostly wiped it out, here's a picture. It's a viral infection, which goes after the respiratory system, the immune system, and the skin. The symptoms usually appear 1 to 2 weeks after exposure, so by the time you know you have it, the person who gave it to you is long gone and probably infecting others. Now, measles comes with a number of symptoms, but usually the first is a fever that can reach up to 104 degrees. If you're lucky and nothing else goes wrong, the disease should only stay around for about 7 to 10 days. But for children, especially those under 5, this can be too long to wait. In 2013, that's just 2 years for those keeping track, over 96,000 kids worldwide died of the measles, most of them under 5 years old. And that's actually down from 1990, where it was over 500,000. Lastly, when it comes to how contagious measles is, 90% of those people who are not immune will catch it if they are in the same living space. So the recent outbreak at Disneyland has actually made a lot of people vocally angry about the rising anti-vaccination movement. Now, most of this anger is not just directed at the people because they want to tell everybody how to live. It's because for everyone to be safe, for a community to be safe, you have to reach what's called herd immunity. That's when a high enough percentage of the people in the community are actually immunized against a particular disease, so if it does show up, it won't spread from one person to the entire community. Each disease has its own herd immunity levels, which you can see here in this pic. Now, the anti-vaccination crowd has another angle too. They're voters. The reaction to this outbreak was for some people to call for all vaccinations to be mandatory. Now, that doesn't sit too well with the people who want government out of their lives and hands off their health care and all that sort of thing. Now, this sent the GOP presidential hopefuls into a PR tizzy. It got even more intense when President Obama said that everybody should get vaccinated and the science for vaccinations is indisputable. He also took a picture of himself getting vaccinated. So if Obama is for it, the GOP has to find a way to be against it. But are they willing to go on the record telling people not to vaccinate their children? Let's get a quick rundown of their responses. Scott Walker, governor of Wisconsin. All for himself and his family getting immunized, but no comment on whether it should be mandatory for everyone else. John Kasich, governor of Ohio, same deal. Bobby Jindal, governor of Louisiana, would not personally send his kids to a school that didn't require immunizations, and he blasted the fear-mongering against it, but no comment on whether it should be mandatory. Marco Rubio, all kids in America should be vaccinated, but he didn't say how he would make that happen. Rick Perry, ex-governor of Texas, touts his increased vaccination numbers during his time as governor, but fails to mention during his presidential campaign in 2012, he disavowed an HPV vaccination program in his own state. Carly Fiorina said states should control the decisions, and she also says that not all vaccines are the same, connecting MMR versus HPV. Chris Christie, Republican governor of New Jersey, initially said it was fine for him and his family, but some choice should exist. Then he quickly backpedaled, saying the states should make a decision. He also comes off a touch hypocritical since he quarantined a nurse during the Ebola outbreak after the medical professionals had already said she was clear to be free. Then comes Rand Paul, who started with the common thread that is fine for him, but everybody else should be able to make their own choices, and he solidly came out against making it mandatory. He also dropped a nugget on live television saying he heard of many stories of kids who were walking, talking, and perfectly fine until they got vaccinated, and then they came down with a mental developmental disorder. Once again, it is surprising the level of obliviousness of these politicians these days who don't understand that once you say something on live television, it is not easy to just walk it back and say you were misheard, which is exactly what Rand Paul tried to do by saying he never said that autism was directly connected to vaccinations. He just said vaccines and these diseases in these particular cases that he doesn't mention happened at the same time. You know, a coincidence. He's now resorted to doing the same thing as Obama and actually sending out a picture of him being vaccinated to ease the fears that he is part of the anti-vaccination crowd. Testing my resolve to show that I will agree with people on certain cases, no matter how many other times I disagree with them. Dr. Ben Carson, one of the most far-right people in the Tea Party movement and the conservative movement right now who once said that Obamacare was the worst thing to happen to America since slavery. He's the only one out of the entire field who has actually come out and said that some vaccines should be mandatory. So there you have it. That's the key, the main reason that this is an important discussion. When one family or community decides not to immunize, they are not just endangering their own children's health, they are endangering the health of other children and families in that community nearby, because immunization works best when it's strength in numbers. Lastly, lest I forget, Representative Mo Brooks from Alabama. He actually found a way to blame this all on illegal aliens, not unvaccinated Americans, because they're patriotic. So Mr. Brooks, if you're out there, let me give you a quick rundown of the immunization levels in all of those countries that we seem to be getting those diseased illegal aliens from. Mexico, 99%. Nicaragua, 99%. Panama, 98%. Belize, 96%. Guatemala, 93%. Honduras, 93%. El Salvador, 93%. At the bottom of this list, United States. All in all, 108 countries actually have higher vaccination records than the United States. Now, I can understand the parents of autistic children who want answers, and I can understand families who are a little scared about the health of their children. I'm a new parent myself. I remember going through this discussion, but the discussion didn't last long. It's an incredibly emotional decision, but it shouldn't be. We should listen to science. We should listen to the facts and look at the numbers of the kids who died before the vaccine was ever created and ask ourselves, is it worth risking the life of our own child because one doctor wrote a study that was thoroughly debunked and he's still crowing about it today? So what do you think? Should vaccines be mandatory? Only some of them? And if you do think they should be mandatory, who should be the one to mandate it? The states or the federal government? Should schools be allowed to deny kids who are not vaccinated? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks as always for watching another episode. You can like, favorite, share, subscribe, all those buttons down below as always. And also, if you have any topics that you would like discussed in a future episode, leave me a comment, send them in, we'll see what we can do. So stay tuned for next week, and now as always, here's a little bit of Logan. Once again, it is surprising the level of obliviousness of these politicians these days who don't understand that once you say something on live television, it is not easy to just walk it back and say you were misheard.